Hey everybody, so today I'm going to structure a whole diet. I'm going to go through the whole thing, how I figure out how many calories you should have, or this person should have, how I structure their macros, and I'm even going to go into how I would like to see them timing their macronutrients throughout their day. All right, so getting in, this is actually one of my clients. They just contacted me. They want me to start helping them structure their diet. So it's a 150-pound person, and they're looking to gain good size, okay? So no matter, what a person's goal is, if they're in here working with me, they're in a gym, they're working out, I like to base everybody's diet around protein. They're in here, they're training hard, I know they are. So to me, considering protein as the number one thing to base your diet around makes sense. You don't want to lose muscle. If you're losing muscle, you're in a catabolic state. If you're in a catabolic state, you're releasing cortisol. You got all these other things going on in your body that are going to help, or not help, but prevent you from losing body fat. It can also make you feel stressed out all the time losing muscle. Then you can develop the skinny fat that everybody talks about. Keeping muscle around or even building it is conducive to burning more calories at any given state at your resting rate. The more muscle you have, the more energy you're burning doing nothing. So it helps even if you are in here and you're wanting to lose body fat. Consider protein first, okay? With that in mind, and the fact that they weigh 150 pounds, okay, going off of the best protein requirements or the best protein recommendations that are out there right now, the range is between 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. That's if you're training. Now, if you're a sedentary person and you're just trying to figure out how much protein you need, a good dose, just to be a sedentary person, it's usually 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. However, like I said, if they're in here, they're working with me, they're working out. I know they are. So they're gonna fall between that 1 and 1.5 grams range, okay? So for this person, they're just now coming back into working out. I'm gonna use 1.1 as their multiplier. So I'm gonna take their body weight, I'm gonna multiply it by 1.1 right here, and we get 165 grams of protein. That's where I would like to see them start off, okay? 165 grams of protein. That's what we're gonna base this entire diet around. So we have 165 grams of protein. How do we get everything else? From there, we're gonna calculate how much calories they need a day based on that amount of protein. So then what you have to do is consider how much protein or how much of that do you wanna represent your total caloric intake based on protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So we're talking about our macronutrient ratios or our macro ratios, okay? For this client, because they're trying to gain weight, when you're trying to gain muscle, gain good weight, I like to start with protein representing 30% of the diet. Now, don't hear 30% and think that I'm giving them a small amount of protein. Remember, we're basing everything around protein. So we figured the protein out first. How much does this person need to be gaining good muscle? Then we base the calories around that. So if we make the protein represent 60%, then the calories are gonna be low based on that. But if we make the protein represent 30%, well then the carbohydrates and fat have to come up to represent an even higher percentage of the diet than the protein. So with protein representing 30% of his total macro ratio, then we can figure out his calories, okay? So if protein is going to represent 30% of his macronutrient ratio, okay, then we have to figure out how many calories are in 165 grams of protein. So this is pretty common knowledge here. Every gram of protein is 4 calories. Every gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories. Every gram of fat is 9 calories, okay? Taking that into consideration, we're gonna multiply 165 grams of protein times 4 and we get 660 calories, okay? So every day from the protein, if he's hitting 165, that's 660 calories. And like we said, that 660 calories is gonna represent 30% of his total diet every day. So then we take the 660, we divide by our percent, so 0.3, and we see that 660 is 30% of 2,200 calories. So 2,200 calories is our total caloric goal every day for this person to start off with while starting to get into a weight training routine to see good muscle gain, nice clean muscle gain, okay? So now that we have our total caloric intake every day, then we can figure out our other ratios, our carbohydrates and our fats, based on what percent we want to see those represent. So again, weight gaining subject, and this subject, you know, he's 150 pounds, so, you know, relatively lean and of small build, you know, maybe what some people would consider a hard gainer. I like to start them off at a higher percent of carbohydrates. So for them, I'm going to start them off at 40%, okay? So 40% of 2,200 is going to be 880. Now again, going back to our conversion chart of sorts here, we know every calorie, or every 4 calories of carbohydrates is 1 gram of carbs. So we take 880 divided by 4, and we get 220, okay? 220 grams of carbs a day is what I'm hoping that he hits for his intake. Same formula, same concept for fat, except remember now we're going 9 calories for every gram. We see that his fat is going to represent 30% of his intake every day. That's going to come out to 660 calories a day from fat. So that's going to come out to 73 grams of fat every day. I'd like to see this client hit. Okay, so now we have our total goals every day. Okay, we have 165 grams of protein, 220 grams of carbs, 73 grams of fat every day. I'd like to see this client hit. Going over a few more sheets. Okay, we take those numbers, 165 protein, 220 carbs, 73 in fat. Now what I tell clients to do, and again, this is all starting procedure, right? This is a good starting place for most people. Take those numbers, divide them by 4, okay? 4 is an easy number of meals to hit every day. You have your 3 main ones, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you have an extra one that you can turn into a post-workout snack, or you can turn into 2 little small snacks, okay? So we take those numbers, divide by 4, and we see that each time we're sitting down to eat, we should be hitting 40 grams of protein, 55 grams of carbs, and 18 grams of fat. All right, so now we're breaking all this math and all these numbers down into manageable parts. Now it's starting to become easier to work with. And take it a step further. We go down, for this client, we're gonna give breakfast, lunch, dinner, and we're gonna give a post-workout option here, okay? So I'm not gonna change the protein. Every time they sit down to eat, I want them hitting that 40 grams of protein. There are lots of reasons here, we can go into it, but essentially my main concern, because they're trying to gain muscle, is every time they consume protein that they stimulate muscle protein synthesis. 40 grams isn't a magic number, but it does cross a magic threshold where, depending on the person's size, they need a certain amount of protein to stimulate the anabolic process. Sitting down and eating 10, 15, 20 grams of protein might stop catabolism. It might stop your body from breaking down muscle, but it's not going to put you in any kind of state where you're constantly building muscle, okay? So keeping the protein high at every meal, 40 grams for this client, is going to ensure that throughout the day, every time they eat, they're stimulated, they're doing the best they can to stimulate an anabolic state in their body. For the carbohydrates and the fats, though, we're going to manipulate those a little bit. And so this is where we get into nutrient timing, okay? I'm going to keep it simple for this client. Again, this is a good starting point. For carbohydrates, and fats, I like to think of as sort of inverse relationship. So we start the day low in carbs and we work up, and then we start the day high in fats and we work our way down. And it's just a simple way to think about it. It's not technically true, it's just a simple way to think about it. So for carbohydrates, their breakfast and their lunch, I only want them hitting between 10 and 20 grams of carbohydrates. Okay, so it's not a lot, but the reason being is because most people work out in the first half of the day. So keeping them low in carbohydrates will keep them from being sleepy, feeling kind of foggy. Going into a workout, they don't have a whole lot of drive, okay? It's also going to make sure that when they do have carbohydrates later in the day after their workout with dinner, that their body is ready to utilize it. So I'm not having them, unlike protein where they have a high amount every meal, I want them only taking in carbohydrates when their body is ready to utilize it, so it's not drifting around aimlessly looking to get stored into fat. Now for fat, we'll start the day off high. Typically, if I have my way, a client will eat a breakfast high in animal meats, nuts, things like that. So fat is real easy to hit in the morning. It's also good for setting up your day the right way as far as your body chemistry goes. Again, another topic you can go really deep into. But 36 grams for breakfast sounds really high, but it's really easy to hit if you're eating the right food choices, okay? For the lunch and dinner, they have 18 grams that they can hit. Now, those are just ballpark numbers I'd like for them to keep in mind, okay? Post-workout, we're gonna keep fat to 0 or very minimal, okay? I don't want fat being consumed at the same time you're driving up insulin really high with those post-workout carbs. So there we have all their macronutrient intake every day, divided by 4, broken down in between meals, and then I time those nutrients based on when I think that their body is best going to utilize them. It's not incredibly hard. From here, then this is the part where most people don't like. Then they have to start figuring out, well, what is 40 grams of protein? What is 36 grams of fat? This is where people typically lose steam in their diet because they don't want to do the homework and figure out, what food contains. But it's a process that might last a week, maybe 2 weeks at most. We don't eat 1,000 different things in our life. We typically eat the same foods over and over. So after you take stock of what you typically eat, chicken, beef, turkey, whatever other meats that you eat, the typical same carbohydrates that you eat, you're going to have a database. You're going to get really familiar with those foods, and you're going to know this much rice is this many grams of carbs. This much chicken is this much protein. So this is the easy stuff right here. The formulas that I use for this client, anybody can use. And like I said, from here, once you have your breakdown of each meal, you just got to figure out, well, what does that food look like? What does dinner look like if I want 40 grams of protein, 60 to 80 grams of carbs, and about 18 grams of fat? Okay, so stick with it for about a week or two. You'll be amazed at how easy it is to think about food after that. And like I said, this is a good starting point for this person right here. You can get real technical with your diets later on down the road, and then you can add in things like supplements and whatnot. But everybody needs to start from somewhere. And most people coming in to me, they're starting from nowhere. They got nothing going on. They have no log of food to show me. They have no history of eating right. So this is as good as any other place to start with a diet. Stay on something like this for a month or two when you're hitting it nice and solid, and then you can tweak it. You can go really high fat days. You can go really low carb days. You can start cycling your macronutrients based on your goals. From here, for this individual client, taking it a step beyond, they have a food intolerance lab. So now for this client, I'm going to go through that lab and I'm going to write food choices for each of these meals and say, based on your labs, these foods would be good at these times, and these foods would be better at these times. So like I said, you can get real technical with diets, but you always have to start from somewhere. People always want to skip the basic stuff and get real to the advanced stuff. And the truth is, you don't need to go that far. This will give this client amazing results once they get to the point where they can stick to it really easy. So I hope that helps a lot of you out there. If any of you have any questions about specifics that might apply to you, come find me, email me, hire me as your coach. I'll see you around in the next videos.